right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another broadcast of Project 365, where we aim to bring hope, encouragement, and inspiration to the entire world. I am your host for this week, filling in for our wonderful President and founder, Miss Portia Wheatley. She is the president and founder of Trophy of Life, which is a nonprofit organization, and Project 365 is under this umbrella. Now, let me bring in my beautiful co-host of this week.
Hello, Takira and everyone watching. My name is Celenia Arce, and I'm so grateful to share in this platform and to be trusted with this platform by Portia, who I love and affectionately call Ma. Just been having a great time with Takira this week.
Awesome. I've been having a great time with you as well. I think we're doing pretty good. So today we're going to talk about a very interesting topic. We're going to talk about church. Dun, dun, dun. And, we're going to talk about how church has affected our lives, the importance of church, what we think about it, and how being brought up in church has raised or set a foundation for our lives and how it's affected us. So, Stacey, do you want to kind of start with your church background there?
Sure, absolutely. So church has always been a part of my life. My mother loves to tell a story that the day before she gave birth to me, she was actually in church and she shouted. So since womb, I've been in church. My mother's an elder. My grandparents were pastors. I actually got the privilege of, and I count it a privilege now, I didn't always, but I moved around a lot. And my grandparents, along with my mother, were like my mother's co-parents. So I was raised partially in a Spanish-speaking Pentecostal church where my grandfather was the pastor. So very much a PK in that sense. And it was very, very strict, very religious, very legalistic. I went to church every single day. And then I also grew up in the Black church with my mom, mostly Baptist. Shout out to New Home Baptist Church out in Landover, PG County, Maryland. And then as an adult, made my way to Kingdom Worship Center, thanks to my then advisor and Alpha and Omega, Elder Nakia D. Jones. And I've been a member of Kingdom for 16 years. I grew up in church, basically. Church has never not been a part of my life, even when I didn't want it to be. I even went to a Christian private school at one point when I lived in Florida. And, I used to hate it. So like when I say I went to church every single day, if my grandparents were visiting someone's house, we had service. If we were just so happened to be home on a very rare occasion, before we went to bed, we had service. Like, literally praise and worship, read the scripture, like the whole literally order of a service. And my grandfather would preach to my grandmother, myself, my sister, and my two male cousins who also live with us. And so we could not get away from it, even if we wanted to. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the lessons that I've learned. I'm grateful for the foundation spiritually. Although, and we'll probably get into that later, some of it I've been able to decolonize a little bit and realize, we learn better, we know better, we do better. And I don't always agree, and didn't even then always agree with what the church was teaching or what my grandfather was teaching, but I now am more mature enough in my faith to realize they were doing the best that they did, that they knew how, and teaching us the best that they knew with what they had and the information that they had. What about you? How was it growing up in church for you?
Well, so kind of the same, but a little different. So I've only been a part of one church my entire life, which is Kingdom Worship Center. Back then when I was growing up, it was called Bethel Holy Tabernacle. So Archbishop Ralph Dennis, he's my spiritual father, and I've known him my entire life. He baptized me. So that just shows you how long I've been there. And I would say that, well, first of all, like you, now we know both of us. We know how Archbishop is. Shout out to Archbishop Ralph Dennis. And we know, especially back in the day, he's a little long-winded, just a little bit. So we were in church all day, all day, all the time. And my parents were very involved in church. And they were deacons in the church. So we would be there opening and closing. And then they also drove the church van to take people home. So I was also on that van. School nights, I'm sleeping in the back row of the van, dropping everybody off so we can get everything done. And I definitely know what it's like to be in church every day of the week. You have Bible study, you got midweek service, you got revivals, you got morning service, afternoon service, which then goes into the evening. So I definitely know all about that.
All night prayer services and everything.
Yes. Oh my gosh. All night prayer services. And, growing up, sometimes it could be hard for a kid because, kids are kids. You don't want to, come on, we got to move around. But, especially back then, Bethel Holy Tabernacle was much more strict than Kingdom Worship Center is now. We have evolved a lot as a church. But I'm very grateful for those things that were instilled in me, that kind of set a tone and foundation of how I should try to live my life. I can say that I think I was telling you the other day how, I have friends who grew up in the same neighborhood, went to the same schools, middle school, elementary school, high school, and we're just completely different. And the only difference is the church that I went to, and it's had such a big impact on my life. And I got a lot I can say about Kingdom Worship Center. But yeah, I am very grateful for my spiritual leaders, who are like family to me. I'm grateful for the good things I've experienced, the not so good things I've experienced, and we can talk about that, because especially growing up in church, like if you've been in church all your life, you're bound to have some type of church drama. Mm-hmm. It's just what it is. But I've learned, of course, now that I'm older, that, church has kind of changed for me. It's more for me about the relationship that I have with God and trying to develop that rather than church per se. Mm-hmm. So I mean, church is very, very important. I feel like you should go in fellowship, but I don't necessarily have to be in church morning, noon, and night, 5 days a week to have a great relationship with God. So that's kind of transformed as I've gotten older. So yeah.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think that's where a lot of people are, with COVID, being forced to worship from home. And I would tell people, it was like, my grandfather didn't realize that he prepared me for this because right. I had that example growing up, but not everybody did. Mm-hmm. And it really challenged everyone to realize like, oh, wait, we say it, but we are the church. The church mm-hmm. is a building. It is an institution, but it's also the people.
Right.
Which, as you mentioned, a lot of times that's where most of the challenges come from. Growing mm-hmm. up in church, being a part of church, is people. We're all on different parts of the journey. I know for me, growing up, most of my childhood was with my grandparents. And so moving with my mom here to Maryland in high school, joining a Black church was a bit of a culture shock for me. Because in Florida, although, my Christian school was a Black church, but it was very diverse. Okay. Coming to Maryland, it was a bit of a thing that I was Puerto Rican. And I'm like, I never understood it. I didn't mm-hmm. understand it. I would be like, but I'm Black. And people were like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I am. And, it's amazing now, like in 2021, where people are finally learning the difference between race and ethnicity. Back then, it wasn't that awareness and that knowledge just wasn't there, specifically not just in the Black community, but even in the Hispanic community up here. I felt really out of place, even in church. And it was hard for me because church was such a mainstay in my life. So now to be at this church and feel like I don't fit in anywhere, it's kind of trailed me even into my adulthood, where I'm still trying to figure out my place, not necessarily in ministry, because the foundation that was laid has always empowered me to work in ministry in some way, but it's trailed me in trying to find my place with the people, specifically, to be very honest, with women. It's been very challenging for me because I've always felt othered in a lot of ways. I've even had to correct some leaders in church who are like, oh, well, yeah, she can do this and she can wear that because she's Puerto Rican. I'm like, no, don't do that. Don't do that, because I'm all about, I don't do, politics and, especially respectability politics. I'm like, no, women can wear whatever they want. It's you that needs to get it together. Don't do that whole, oh, she's spicy because she's Puerto Rican. But that has been probably the one point in my church life that has been a point of growth for me, learning how to navigate those relationships. And I'm still learning. I'm almost 40 years old and I'm still learning. And I realize that is a lot of what, there's a lot of institutional things that is a whole other episode, but I realize that's a lot of what keeps people away from church too.
Right. So with everything you said, I've now realized we're going to have a part 2 to this because there's so much we can say, but I'm glad you did say that about your experience. So one thing that I feel that church people do, and I'm saying church people because we have some people that are not believers and they don't go to church, and we have to categorize ourselves in that way, is I hate labels. I really do. And we label people all the time, just like they're saying, oh, you're Puerto Rican, so you're doing this. Why are you putting this label on her? Like, what does that have to do with anything? That's like saying, I mean, nobody will want that to be said about them because of their ethnicity, that, oh, this is why you're doing what you're doing. No, first of all, that's rude. That's number one. Okay. I think, especially now, since we have all these new rules with the pandemic, we just need to have like a church 101, like etiquette course. And the etiquette course is just about being a kind human being. Like, that's all you have. That's all you have to start out. Treat people the way you want to be treated. So if you don't want anyone to come to you and say, oh, girl, I see you got that on, because no, don't do it to anybody else. And, the Bible says, come as you are. And that's one thing that I love about Kingdom Worship Center, is that even though we were super strict at Bethel Holy Tabernacle, Archbishop Ralph Dennis, he's very open-minded and he accepts all. Even if he doesn't agree with your lifestyle per se, he doesn't push you away from God. But that can't be said about everybody that goes to church, because you have the same, the church politics of it all. And I think what we have to do as a people is we have to start getting away from religion per se, and then start, focusing on our relationship and spirituality with God, which is kind of like, a taboo to some traditional church people, because they're used to having church, church this, church that. This is how my relationship with God is. But no, you can meet God one-on-one. You don't have to do all the church politics. You don't have to wear the long skirt for the Lord to love you. You don't have to not wear nail polish, and I'm not disrespecting anyone's beliefs that, if you feel like you have to do that, but I'm just saying that to all the viewers out there, it's not necessary to follow all these religious rules to get to know God. And that's one thing that I've learned growing up, coming from a church that has progressed so much, from a holiness church back in the day in the 80s to now I can wear jeans to church and sneakers and wear whatever I want, basically, respectfully. But I don't have to wear all black on first Sundays every Sunday,
Slips and pantyhose.
Right. I don't have to wear my stockings in 100-degree weather, because I'm not gonna do it. But let me just have a sidebar. So I'm sure you had to wear tights and like stockings growing up as a little girl. And men, you're not going to understand this feeling, but this is a random sidebar. But when you've been in church all day in those hot tights and you finally get to take them off. Is that not the best feeling in
The
the world?
best
The
feeling. And
best
mind you, remember I
feeling.
said I grew up partially in Tampa, Florida. It's hot. And the
Hot.
humidity here in Maryland, like they be sticking to you. Oh my gosh.
Yes, the tights. And then if
It's like
you're
the
little, you have
perfect.
tights and then ruffle socks. It's just too much. So yeah, men won't get it, but women, we know. I'm so glad we're a little bit past that. So, Celenia, in your opinion, like what's your opinion about some challenges we may have with church now, even though pretty much everyone's kind of progressing towards, changing and being more open-minded, less judgmental, more spiritual and not religious. But what challenges do we still face in church, just period, in your opinion?
I think one of the major challenges, which I'm starting to see people talk about more, is, and I talk about it a lot, shameless plug on my podcast, the Radiant
Woo-hoo.
Sessions, is decolonizing our faith and our beliefs.
Mhm.
Because especially as descendants of enslaved Africans, our masters, the masters, they picked out parts of the Bible to indoctrinate those who were enslaved in a certain way. And it's time now where there are those who are doing the work, but as a body, it's time to start questioning the things that we've just been passing along as our beliefs and our traditions, because that's just what we know, and really interrogate, is that really the truth? Or is that just what we've been holding on to because it's familiar? One of the things that I'm really big on is interrogating purity culture. And even you're laughing about the dress code that we would have to wear, and realizing, where did that come from? Our enslaved African ancestors did not wear stockings and slips to be considered spiritual beings. Who we are, our sovereignty as people, is not predicated on what we wear. It's, even just asking questions about, again, it's not necessarily wrong, but why we wear certain regalia in church that really resembles more the Roman Catholic tradition. We're not Catholic. We're not European, and really start to unpack that. And it's not easy, but I think as a body, as a church, it's definitely something that we need to move towards too. I went to a convocation this past week. I was actually working director of media, and the lady who was preaching was saying, like, we not only need to question these things, but we need to start correcting the errors of our ancestors. And not in a critical way, because that's, like I said earlier, they were doing the best that they could with what they had, but let's correct the errors so we can move forward and be empowered. Let's stop just demonizing what comes from Africa and the beliefs and the traditions that are African. Those are our people. And they know God, and they knew God. They did not need the European missionaries who stole our people from the land to tell them who God was and who God is.
I completely agree. And I think that's one thing that we should all challenge each other to do. I'm challenging our viewers today is just do your research. Just how, especially millennials, we Google everything, but Google research, pick up a book, get different references. One thing I really like when I'm studying the Bible is studying different translations, not just, oh, this is what I'm going to read and this is what I know. No, get different resources, pick up some articles, let's do some research. And I don't want you guys to feel that, we're knocking anything from the past. We're not doing that. All we're saying is just look a little deeper for yourself rather than just believing what anyone would say. And that also has to go back in developing a relationship with God for yourself. And one thing I have decided to do since I got older, I got to the point where I said, you know what? I know the God that my parents taught me about, and I want to know God for myself. I know how great God is and awesome and all the miracles he can do through the experiences of my parents and people before me. But I'm like, God, I want to experience you for myself. what's going on here? And that's great. Like, you can do miracle signs and wonders. That's fine. But hey, how about you do something for me so I can get to know you better so that I can say, you know what, God is this. I can
Mhm.
stand flat footed, matter of factly, and say, I know God is real. And this is why, because he's done this for me. In addition to, oh yeah, he's also, Cece was blind, God forbid, and now she's singing and she's walking. Like, no,
Yeah.
no, no. Like, let's get to know him for ourselves. And I think that's just something we have to grow to do as a church body, is just to get to know God more for ourselves and just do our research on why we do the things that we do. And then I feel like once you do that research, maybe be just a little less judgmental, just a little bit, just a smidge. Because at the end of the day, especially those believers, who believe in Jesus, Jesus was all about love and accepting everybody. He didn't push anyone away because you look different, or you spoke differently, you dressed differently. And that's what the church does sometimes. It's like, oh, everybody come, 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 but hold on, not you. Like, wait a minute,
Mhm.
we got God for you, but go sit in the corner. No, come up here with us.
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
okay if you're different. We love different. And I just feel like if we can embrace that, embrace the new with the traditional and come together, that's what we can find a happy median, and we can affect more people that way. So
Absolutely. And that's a great, great challenge, because it's like I've had a great foundation in growing up in church. But it wasn't until my 30s that I started to realize, like, wait, I've been surviving, thank God, on the practices of my grandfather, of my mother, of my grandmother. And I hadn't gotten to a place where I created my own spiritual practice. What is it for me that
mhm.
leads me to God, that has me feeling connected to God? Some people, and I ask this question from people because I love to hear the answers, and some people say, you know what, church is great, but I feel more connected to God in nature, at the
Mhm.
beach, when I'm alone and I'm meditating,
Mhm.
and that's what's important, to create those rituals for yourself. So then you can now share that with other people, and then
Mhm.
they can take that journey for themselves and say, oh, well,
Mhm.
you know what, this worked for them, but now I'm going to get to know God for me.
Mhm. And one thing I like about that is that if we are supposed to be, the body of Christ, and we are supposed to draw people to Him, we have to understand that not everybody is going to worship God the same. We're not all the same. So, how can we affect the masses if we're just going in one direction? Because there are people who love nature and love the beach, love to take walks, and love to meditate and think on God that way. But you're not gonna get those people if you're like, oh no, you got to come to church for our 8 o'clock service, our 11 o'clock service, and our 5 o'clock service, and make sure you have on slacks and don't have any toe cleavage showing. They're like, I'm not coming. Like, what? So I encourage people to just find out what works for you. And I'm not saying don't go to church, because I think going to church is still very important, to fellowship with people, especially in the pandemic, safely. So do
Mhm.
that safely, guys. But just not limiting yourself to, I only worship God or praise God or meditate on Him when I come to the house of the Lord, and I come to an actual church building, because you can do that. God is everywhere. And I feel like when you appreciate God and you get to know Him, and just look at all the things that He's created around Him, like, and you can appreciate Him more. Like, God, thank you for this nature. Thank you for this, the trees, the shade, the rain. When you start thanking God for the little things, I feel like that's when you can start to encompass who God is,
Yeah.
as much as our finite minds can understand.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think that as individuals do that, that's also another challenge for the church, is
Mhm.
how we maintain connection with our members, how we provide covering, because that's another benefit of having a local church home, is that I know, our spiritual father, Archbishop Raphael Dennis, but also our local pastors and Bishop Gregory and Pastor Tanya
Yes,
are
yes.
constantly covering us and praying for
Mhm.
us, and investing in us. but also the church is also, I think, at this place realizing, well, how do we move forward now that this pandemic has changed so much about what the congregation looks like and what it means to be a faithful member of a local church. It's not going to be the same as it was, before March 2020. It's just not. Right. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
It'll look different, and we will still have community. We will still have, the church isn't going anywhere. It's still important. It's still needed.
Very much.
Yeah. How we plug in is going to be a little different.
And I just want to encourage people, because like e-campuses and e-churches, like that is basically where we're going. Because even when the pandemic is over, I know some people are going to say, well, you know what? I've been watching church online for a year. I don't necessarily have to come back. And if that's your prerogative, that's fine. But, actually coming in and engaging with people, you get much more than, just streaming online sometimes. So if you can find a local church that you feel fits your needs, I do encourage you to have more of a hybrid than just picking just one. Yeah. So for example, back in the day, long time ago when I was a teenager, my youth pastors were Bishop G and Pastor T. And I have to say, like, they made such a difference in my life. Like, I honestly can say I would not be the person I am today without them. Especially Pastor T, just in grooming us to like be young ladies, like, and just giving us information, just being real with us, like, hey, this is what's going on. This is how you do this. This is what happens with this. Don't talk to boys if they say this, Like, she was just so that's real needed. With us. Seriously, that's so needed. And you can't always get that from a virtual presence, but there's so much you can gain from virtual streaming online as well. So I just want to encourage you, if you're one or the other, try both. Try more of a hybrid. It's all about doing what's best for you. But I love streaming, but sometimes just coming in and worshiping together as one body is so needed, and you can get that breakthrough that you need and that you're looking for. So just want to encourage everyone to do that.
And to add too, because growing up, being a kid, going to school, you don't always find other kids who believe in God and who go to church. And so it was really important to be able to go to church and have relationships with other kids who had a similar upbringing and was going through the same things. And really, we were trying to live out our beliefs. Most of my friends were saved really young. And so we would be in school, we're kids, but, to have that camaraderie and have that connection is so important. And so, if you have kids, maybe you feel fine just being 100% virtual, but don't forget your children and how important it is for them to connect with other kids who are being raised in the faith and, being taught what, not just morally, but spiritually, how to represent Christ in the earth.
Right. And to know that they're not alone, because if you're being taught, what to do and what not to do, and you're the only person like you, it's tough. It's going to be tough to live a life, to try to follow God if no one else around you is doing that. So in other words, bring your kids to church, like, please do so. Because I'm telling you, like, it'll change their lives. It'll change your life. And you can create a network. It's everything. I'm telling you, all comes back to basics, like basic fundamentals. Networking and having a connection with people is so important. And I also feel that, especially since the pandemic, we all know the importance now of being around other human beings. Okay. We know the importance of human touch. We know the importance of just a hello, how are you, in person, a hug, a handshake. Let's not shy away from that, even though it's so easy to do so because we've been used to that for a year. But it's just something that you need. It's going to be a little hole in your little heart that's missing, because we need each other. Absolutely. And it's good for your mental health, especially for kids. You need to be around other people. We need people, whether you like people or not.
We do.
You'll be healthier.
Yeah. We are not islands amongst ourselves. So
Yes.
that's great. This
So,
conversation has been so good.
So anyone watching, if you have any comments, just leave the comments below. We'll check them out later. We'll look at them. And like I said before, I think this is going to have to be like a part one, because there's so many different things we can talk about, like growing up in church and how it's changed our lives, and the challenges that we face even now as adults, with church changing. But I feel like this is a great start to create a dialogue of what church is, what it means to us, and how it's moving, and what it is for us today. So I just want to say I enjoyed dialoguing with you about this.
Me too.
And like I said, guys, if you have any comments, just drop them below, hit us up, email us. Also, please subscribe to our YouTube page, okay? With your help, by subscribing and liking and sharing these videos, you help us to bring hope, encouragement, and inspiration to the entire world. People that I don't know. Yeah. Let's network, let's branch, let's affect people and give them positivity. Everyone needs positivity in their lives, especially right now. And that's all what Project 365 is about. So until next time, I want to say everyone have a wonderful day, and we will see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Bye-bye.